I don't know that people grasped the gravity of the situation at the time. I mean, it was a big deal because it was the end of the Monday Night Wars, but I think people thought, well, something else will pop up. And nothing ever really did. I know TNA existed, but I guess it exists. You know what I mean? It's just, it's not the same.
No, it's not. But at the time, it was an end of an era. And it was a situation that had come to a head like a big nasty pimple, and it all just popped. And then after you cleaned it up, you realize, wow, there's not much there. Bet you never heard that analogy in regards to WCW, just being a big nasty pimple that popped, and then there wasn't much there at the end.
You could also say that it's kind of what happened in the wrestling business. It feels like the WWF has not been the same since. I feel like everybody does their best work when they have competition. And I know that they're trying to compete with themselves right now, but it's certainly not what we had with the Monday Night Wars. But before we can talk about that night specifically, let's lay a little bit of backstory, which is what we like to do here on the show. Eric Bischoff was quoted as saying, towards the end of 1998, around August, it started to become very apparent to me that Time Warner and their conglomerate didn't really want WCW to survive. It was obvious to me because of the things they were doing to us, reallocating budgets that had been already allocated and cutting budgets that had already been approved 6 months or a year in advance. Bischoff would go on to leave WCW in the fall of 1999, and when he came back in the spring of 2000, he realized that WCW was just not going to survive this new AOL Time Warner merger. So he starts pitching Brad Siegel on selling the company, meaning if he didn't want to fix it, maybe he should sell it. So by late 2000, Siegel finally agrees, and Eric starts to shop for a deal. Who Bischoff found were Brian Bedall and Steve Greenberg of Fusion Media Ventures, and they founded the Classic Sports Network in 1995 and then sold it to ESPN a couple years later for $175 million. So these guys have some cash, and they're familiar with sports entertainment, and they're familiar with television. So Bischoff winds up raising $67 million with Fusion Media Ventures to purchase WCW. And this all happens at the end of 2000. And somewhere around here, a new wrinkle is introduced where Siegel wants 10 years of the programming for TBS as part of that contract. And Ted Turner is supposedly furious at the decision to sell and demands the programming does not wind up with Rupert Murdoch or Fox Networks. Of course, knowing that Ted Turner has a hard-on for Rupert, Bischoff reports meetings with Fox and FX, probably to just lock down the TV deal. Now, I'm freestyling that as a guess, but don't you think that would be the smart play here, Bruce, if you know for sure that Turner doesn't like Rupert Murdoch and you as Bischoff are wanting to lock down the TV contract? Does it seem like something you'd float out there?
Well, sure, I would float it out there anyway just to make the deal more appealing.
Sure.
But truth be told, at the time, Turner with AOL was on his way out.
Absolutely. In 2000, WCW lost around $60 million, a significant amount of money, the most any wrestling company's ever lost in a year. Got to be, right, Bruce?
I would think so.
So they do away with house shows and combine the Nitro and Thunder tapings as a cost-cutting measure. It's worth mentioning here, Bruce, that they were averaging a 2.4 rating in the last quarter of 2000 and only doing a 2.1 towards the end. By the way, Raw this past week did a 2.97.
Roll Tide.
Wow, look at you. You've been in Alabama long enough now. We're getting a little Roll Tide action.
Roll Tide. We got to explain that one day to our viewers.
No, they'll figure it out. Okay. It's worth a Google. 2.4. This is viewed as the death knell. Like, oh, my God, there's 2.4. Shut it down. Now, obviously, they're losing cash, too, but I mean, we're at a 297 now.
Yeah, I know, but the landscape, the television landscape at the time was different. There weren't as many. There's still, it's hard to believe. In 2016 years ago, we thought we had reached the limit of our channels for television, our choices for entertainment. And now you look at the choices for entertainment with Netflix, DirecTV, and all the different streaming services that are out there. And we thought it was bad back then.
Yeah.
So you had it was a different time and a different landscape in the television business.
Let me save you the tweets. DirecTV existed in 2000.
I understand that, but DirecTV,
they have on demand now.
Yes,
and
they're on demand.
I knew what you meant.
You knew what I meant. But thank you. Thank you for saving me
the tweets.
Some tweets, because my thumbs are fat and I'm old, as Conrad says, and every time that I mistakenly think I'm answering a message and I'm actually tweeting, and he will just look at me and say, "This is what happened when old men tweet."
Yeah. Or email, or anything else.
Or anything to do with, the new wave stuff.
Well,
There's this new wave stuff, email.
One of the things I want to talk about with the television ratings here is because of the Monday Night Wars, and that's what I have to credit it for, so many wrestling fans are really enamored and fascinated with ratings as if it's the end-all, be-all indicator for business. And there's a whole lot of folks online who say, well, business is obviously down, talking about the current product, because the ratings are down. But
God, I wish it was down back then as much as it is now.
Oh, it's terrible.
Good God.
So let me just, let's just play this out for a minute. Why are television ratings significant?
Well, television, then or now?
Ever.
Well, it gives you an indication of the size of your audience that's watching your program.
No, come on. I'm talking about money.
Oh, money. Well, advertisers, because that's what the advertisers, they base what they're going to pay based on the rating that your program is delivering.
So the higher the rating,
the higher the ad revenue.
So ad revenue is just one piece of a business indicator of a revenue stream. So this is independent of merchandising and licensing and live events and all the other stuff at the time, pay-per-view, everything else, network now. But you know what I mean. There's 1,000 different revenues, maybe not 1,000. There's a half dozen really significant revenue streams that kind of everything falls into a category. And television, as it is, the way it is right now with the WWF, they receive a huge rights fee. And this, yes, they do get a little bit of inventory, but they're getting paid whether the rating is real high or real low. Sure, on their share and their split of the ad revenue from the stuff that is sold, that money can fluctuate. And if it's really low for a really long time, yes, it could affect their rights fees the next time they renegotiate and the next time the contract's up. But that's not an indicator. That's not the end-all, be-all, rather, as to whether or not business is up or down.
Absolutely not, because you have, as you said, you have your live event, you have your licensing deals with merchandising, and every one of those outlets adds up. And the way that you used to make money in the television business, well, the wrestling business on television, was the ad time that you could sell. And then I will never forget sitting in the conference room in the 4th floor in Titan Towers, and someone came in to show us the future of advertising on television. And they took an Olympic program, and they took just feeds from the Olympics, and they showed us about how the 44-yard dash was brought to you by McDonald's. Citibank sponsors this replay, and every breath out, every
as a sponsor
line was a sponsor. And the way they place them all over, and you look at the show now,
and there it is.
The replay is brought to you by 2K17, K Jewelers, and all of that is revenue.
Yeah,
every bit of it. And there is no better, in my opinion, company that exploits and gets every single penny from advertisers. Now, the advertising and the sponsorships, in my opinion, are relatively cheap for the WWE because they always over-deliver. And they will always give more to an advertiser. And
wrestling advertising has always been historically considered lowbrow and pennies on the dollar.
Right.
Golf may get a fraction of the rating but command a much higher ad rate and get sponsors like Lexus or Rolex, whereas, Raw is not getting that.
But you got to take hats off to WWE for the way that they do go after their sponsors and their advertisers. And if there's something to sponsor, they'll sell it.
Yeah, and it's worth mentioning, there was lots of talk, at least online during their most recent pay-per-view, where they were doing lots of fan cutaways and fan reactions in the replays. It had a sponsor.
Of course.
So if you wonder, hey, where are all these replays in here? Why are Come on. That's a sponsor. It's a revenue stream. But the reason ratings were relevant back then as wrestling fans and even from a front office standpoint is you guys were competing.
Yes.
And so if they had a 2.4 and you had a 3.1, it was high fives all around. We won.
Well, those were numbers that could be discussed. We weren't going to discuss what the house actually was and what the revenue was, what our rights fees were and things like that.
There was no public record.
So, of course. So ratings were something that you could look at from the outside looking in and go, okay, well, 2 is higher than 1.
Yeah.
3 is higher than 2.
Because with everything else, you can gamify it. And
right.
Not saying you would lie about attendance, Dave Meltzer, but, people...
Meltzer lied about attendance all the time.
Okay.
You don't have to cough that under your breath.
All right, let's move along.